Do you remember the things that brought you joy as a young child? So much of that joy was about relationships and connections. Connecting with other kids as you played hide and seek in the park. Connecting with the earth as you played on the beach, letting the sand cascade through your fingers like little rocky waterfalls. Connecting with your family. I remember one time my family and I went out for dinner. I think we were celebrating somebody's birthday. And on the drive home, a song came on the radio that we all knew, and we started singing together. We started kind of tentatively, kind of quietly, but by the end, we were belting it out like we were on stage together entertaining our invisible audience. It was glorious. Those connections were compromised during the coronavirus pandemic. Friends couldn't hang out and hug each other. Sons and daughters couldn't visit their parents in retirement homes. People couldn't feel the breeze of someone passing behind their chair in a meeting. That human connection was weakened and often lost. And we became sensitized to the importance of relationships. Our workplace well-being is fostered by relationships. The relationships we have with ourselves, the relationships we have with others at work, and the relationships that organizations have with employees. In this talk, I'd like to discuss how workplace well-being is impacted by our relationships at all three of these levels: individual, group, and organizational. Let's start with you. What kind of relationship do you have with yourself? We definitely have relationships with ourselves. For example, the currently popular topic of mindfulness is all about observing our thoughts and feelings and reactions and changing our relationship with ourselves by putting a wedge between those experiences and the real you that's doing the observing. People tend to misunderstand mindfulness as a form of stress relief, but it's really about effective engagement with life. It's about remembering to be attentive, remembering that you have that wedge that can help you act instead of react and engage with life more effectively. The trick is to remember to do that. Apart from mindfulness, how does your relationship with yourself impact on how you engage with life? We can be hard on ourselves or kind to ourselves, judgmental or accepting of ourselves. We can also put demands on ourselves to achieve different things. For example, what goals do you set for yourself at work? And do those goals foster your well-being? For example, the goals we choose to pursue at work can vary in the degree to which they express our interests and our values. Those that do are called self-concordant. And research shows that achieving goals in general promotes well-being, but the boost to well-being is even stronger when the goals we achieve are self-concordant. And guess what? Mindfulness leads people to pursue goals that are more self-concordant, which promotes well-being. Are the goals that you pursue at work self-concordant? Maybe not all of them are, but are some of them? Now, you might be thinking, hold on a second. My job is to accomplish the goals that I'm assigned. I don't get to promote my well-being by pursuing goals that are self-concordant. But you actually can. There's a little something in the world of management called job crafting. Job crafting is about taking steps to modify or redefine our jobs. For example, we can change our task requirements. So if you enjoy parties, you can volunteer to help organize a holiday party. We can change our relationships so we can spend more time with people we like and less time with people we don't like. We can also change our cognitions. So for example, housekeeping staff in a hotel can change the way they think about their job from cleaning up rooms to enhancing the guest experience and lie on the bed when they're finished doing their work and take in what it's going to be like when the guest arrives back in the room. I engaged in this form of job crafting when I started my career. When I finished school, I worked at a consulting firm, and as in many consulting firms, I was responsible for my billable hours. I had to bill enough. But that didn't sit well with me. I didn't like being evaluated on my billable hours. In fact, it bothered me so much because I wanted to make a difference in the lives of clients that I wrote a note to myself, explaining to myself, reminding myself that although I am responsible for billable hours, I can still myself focus on making a difference for my clients, making a difference in people's lives. And I put that note on my bedroom door. And so every night, before I put my head on the pillow, I was reminded about the fact that I can think about my work in a way that is more meaningful to me. And it made me feel better. I engaged in job crafting. Job crafting promotes well-being. This is because job crafting changes the relationship that we have with our work. And as a result, that changes the relationship we have with ourselves. It closes the gap between who we are and who we want to be. Job crafting also promotes performance. It's a win-win. I changed my goals this way. I reoriented myself to my work. Sometimes people change and reorient the way they see their work as a result of facing traumatic experiences. We can grow as a result of these experiences. We call it post-traumatic growth. In one of the most famous papers on post-traumatic growth, the authors profiled a geology professor named Sally Walker, who survived an airline crash that killed 83 people. And she said, when I got home, the sky was brighter. I paid attention to the texture of sidewalks. It was like being in a movie. Now everything is a gift. Such experiences lead people to reprioritize and focus on activities that fill their buckets. And we don't have to go through an experience like that to reprioritize. We can learn from the experience of other people. We can learn from other people going through difficult experiences, and as a result, learn about the value of reprioritizing ourselves. We can learn from them and make wiser choices in our own lives that promote well-being. And one of those things that we change sometimes when we go through difficult experiences or learn from others is that we take it easier on ourselves. For example, looking for a job can be really disheartening. And there's research that shows when people are unemployed and they're looking for work, their well-being goes down. Their depression levels go up, their anxiety levels go up. There was a recent study that was done in the Netherlands that found that when people run into difficulties looking for work, sure enough, they experience lower levels of well-being in the form of lower levels of positive emotions like being happy and being energetic. But this problem was averted by people who had high levels of self-compassion. People who were understanding towards themselves and saw themselves as part of a common humanity. Everyone goes through this. Kept their well-being levels at a high level. We can promote our well-being by reprioritizing and changing from being demanding of ourselves to being sympathetic to ourselves when appropriate. We still have objectives to achieve. We still have things that we have to do. We don't want to just let ourselves off the hook. But when things are difficult, we can take it easy on ourselves, change our relationship towards our own self. One technique that can help you reprioritize and focus on goals that will make you happy is to place some distance between yourself and the situation. Instead of thinking your life right now and the things you want to be different, instead of thinking about things in the here and now, think about things in the there and then. Instead of contemplating changes you want to make in your life, think about how you would advise a friend of yours to make changes in their lives facing similar circumstances as you in the future. Don't think about you yourself now. Think about them in the future. Removing yourself from the situation gives you a broader, more objective perspective. When you change your psychological relationship with yourself, it promotes effective decision-making and well-being. Now, we not only, of course, have relationships with ourselves, we also have relationships with other people. These relationships are so important that the risk of dying, the mortality risk associated with having inadequate social connections, is higher than the risk associated with smoking and alcoholism. We're designed to need other people, and our well-being is enhanced when we build and nurture our relationships. There was a recent study conducted at a company in Spain. All the employees were assigned to one of three groups. The givers were asked to perform 5 acts of kindness for others over the course of 4 weeks. And the receivers were the recipients of those acts of kindness, things like bringing somebody a coffee, helping them out with a task, or cheering them up if they were in a bad mood. There was also, in good scientific form, a control group that didn't receive or give. The results were that a full month after the intervention ended, the receivers had an increase in their happiness compared to the control. So sure enough, being the recipient of good deeds, helpful deeds, improved people's well-being. But what was really interesting is that the givers benefited even more. They had higher job satisfaction, higher life satisfaction, and lower levels of depression. So the benefits of kindness are long-lasting. This lasted over the course of a month after the study ended. And they were more extensive for those who gave rather than received. Receivers also paid it forward and reported engaging in more acts of kindness, even though they weren't asked to engage in any acts of kindness. And they weren't just reciprocating. When the researchers looked at who the receivers were being generous towards, it was towards everybody in the organization, not just the people that were kind to them. So kindness is contagious. It gives new meaning to the idea of being the future you want to see in the world. Your actions can spread broadly. Kindness also makes life easier to take. There was an interesting study conducted in China where the researchers asked study participants to show up at a building on campus. And when they did, there was a Confederate, somebody who was in on the study, who pretended to have trouble carrying 2 cartons up the stairs and accidentally dropped one, and asked the participant if they would help her by carrying one of the cartons up to the 3rd floor. In the other condition of the study, when the people arrived at the building they had to be at, they were simply told that the first part of the study involved them carrying a carton up to the 3rd floor. After they had reached their destination, the people in both of the conditions were asked to estimate how much the cartons weighed. And the people who had helped the Confederate estimated the weight of the carton as lighter than those in the control group. It's amazing. Helping other people can lighten our load. Literally. Being kind to coworkers promotes workplace well-being really, really well, and we spread it to others. Now, not only do we have relationships with other people, our coworkers, but of course we have relationships with leaders as well. Now, the way leaders treat us has a very big impact on our well-being at work. Do you remember working for a really great leader that just boosted you up and made you feel great? Do you perhaps remember working for an awful leader who treated you poorly and dragged you down? Leaders foster well-being by promoting employees' personal resources, by, for example, boosting their confidence. They promote well-being by helping to satisfy employees' needs, by giving them autonomy necessary to make their own decisions about how to meet work objectives. They also promote well-being by offering social support when needed, by, for example, giving someone a pep talk when they miss out on a sale. Leaders also promote well-being through contagion processes. When leaders are in a good mood, employees tend to be in a better mood. When leaders are optimistic, employees tend to be more optimistic. So the well-being of leaders is as important as the well-being of employees because leaders set the tone and have a big impact on the climate of a work group, unit, or organization. Small acts of kindness can not only improve well-being, but can also affect performance. There was a group of U.S. management scholars that had the director of annual giving at a university either thank or not thank a group of university fundraisers. The director simply visited half of the fundraisers and said that she was grateful for their efforts and appreciated their contributions. The researchers then looked at the job performance of the fundraisers 1 week later. And what they found was that the group that had been thanked made 40% more calls to donors than the group that hadn't been thanked. And this was partly because, getting a thanks from the boss is rewarding, so you're rewarded for what you're doing, but it's also because being thanked by the boss increases your well-being. There's a lot of research that shows well-being improves job performance. Leaders can also undermine our well-being. Just before I started working at that consulting firm I mentioned earlier, 2 weeks before that, my sister died. She had cancer. And then I started working, and my boss asked me to put together objectives for the quarter, so I did. I submitted them, and then a day or two later, I was called into the boardroom, and I was sat down, and she started laying into me, saying she didn't like the objectives I'd come up with. She didn't like this one, she didn't like that one, and I was really shocked and really, unhappy because I wanted to do a good job. I was new, I was a new employee, I wanted to do a great job. She said, no, I don't like this one. So I said, okay, well, tell me what's wrong with it, and I'll fix it. She's like, I don't like this one. I said, okay, well, just give me some feedback on what to do differently, and I'll do it because I want to do a good job. And she said, Jamie, stop arguing with me. And I said, no, I'm not arguing. I want to do a good job, so just tell me what to do differently, and I'll do it. And she said, stop being so resistant. Now, when somebody tells you to stop being resistant, you can't say anything, because if you say anything, you're being resistant. So I felt really backed into a corner. I was really frustrated, and I said to her, look, as you know, My sister just died. And now I'm having an argument with my boss. This is not how I wanted my job to go. I'm feeling a little frazzled. Please just give me a second to compose myself and collect my thoughts. And she said, Jamie, stop trying to change the subject. I was flabbergasted. I was so demoralized. I felt like I was shrinking. I felt like I was a grown man who was becoming like 3 inches tall, just sitting in my chair, completely invalidated. Our relationships with our leaders have a very significant impact on our well-being at work, particularly when we are in leadership positions. We have to protect our relationships with our employees and our colleagues because they are a major factor in the promotion of workplace well-being. Now, not only do we have relationships with ourselves and relationships with others, but organizations have relationships with employees. In some organizations, this relationship is transactional. The culture is bureaucratic and the interactions are more formal. In other organizations, the relationship is more informal and the culture is more like a family. And the coronavirus pandemic really showed these two faces of organizations. During the pandemic, some employers said to their employees, hey, we get it. Things are tough right now, right? Take it easy on yourself. We don't expect you to be operating at full capacity. That's okay. Take care of yourself. And there were other organizations that said, suck it up. You're paid to perform, so perform. I've spoken with people who say outright, point blank, my organization does not care. Nobody is interested or listens to our concerns. I even know someone who had to take a leave of absence because the organization that she worked for was so indifferent to her concerns during the pandemic. If the pandemic has taught us anything about workplace well-being, it's that organizations need to care for their employees. And not just as employees. There was a recent paper in the Harvard Business Review that suggested that employees now expect their organizations to help them improve their life experience rather than just their employee experience. Employees want to be supported as people, not as assets. Organizations have long been interested in supporting people. High-performance work systems, high-involvement work systems, high-commitment work systems. These are all designed to support people, but the focus has been on supporting people to perform. But that's not enough anymore. We can't ignore performance, but we need to expand our vision beyond it. What if you implemented a caring HR system that was focused on employee well-being in addition to performance? My longtime colleague at the University of Toronto, Dr. Alan Sachs, has recently been doing a lot of writing on caring organizations. He suggests that organizations that care about their employees are responsive to the needs, interests, and concerns and well-being of organizational members. So, how do you build a caring organization? You need two things. The first is an infrastructure of HR policies and practices that support employee well-being. A caring HR architecture includes practices such as flexible work arrangements that include irregular flexibility that allow for unpaid leave when necessary, work-life balance programs such as on-site childcare and family leave policies that help employees balance their multiple roles, and health and wellness programs offering resources and services that help employees manage their physical and psychological health. The key differentiator is that a caring HR architecture is focused not only on employee performance, but employee well-being, and not just workplace well-being. But that's not enough. The infrastructure is not enough. You also need to have the right climate. It's what I call a climate of human resourcefulness, a climate in which employees feel that the organization cares about them. Resourcefulness better captures what we hope to achieve with our employees, the fact that we respect our employees and can unlock the potential in our people. A climate of human resourcefulness unlocks and elevates resources so that capabilities are broadened and capacity is built and strengthened. This resource unlocking and amplifying process occurs when employees believe that the organization cares about their growth and well-being. In such a climate, policies and practices focus on well-being in addition to, and sometimes instead of, performance. We allow employees to disconnect from work in their leisure time, even though we can require them to be constantly available. We don't monitor their every action at work, even though we have the technology to do it. This shows that we respect people as individuals and don't think of them as tools to be leveraged. It demonstrates that we have their best interests at heart, and employees come to believe and trust that we have their best interests at heart. These aren't just interesting ideas. There is also empirical evidence demonstrating the value of infrastructure and climate in producing well-being at work. There was an international team of researchers, including some Canadians, that did a study looking at high-performance work systems. So these included things like sufficient opportunities for training and development, employees feeling that their jobs are relatively secure, an appraisal system that gave them adequate feedback, and looked at the relationship between this high-performance system and well-being at work. And what they found was there was no relationship between them. The HR infrastructure had no effect on well-being unless employees trusted management. You need to have two things in place: the infrastructure, the architecture, and the right climate. When the right climate was in place, there was a relationship between the HR infrastructure and well-being. Also, under those conditions, there was a relationship between the HR infrastructure and performance. Same results. You need both pieces in place: the infrastructure and the right climate. In short, well-being and performance improve when the organization has a supportive, caring relationship with employees. Well-being at work is promoted when we have the right relationships in place. Relationships with ourselves, relationships with others, and the right relationship between organizations and employees. We all know what promotes well-being. We knew it when we were little kids. But then we grew up and we forgot. When we were young, we were innocent and naive. But then we became strategic. We became shrewd and cunning, even manipulative. This strategic ability stage is not the pinnacle of development, however. It's merely a way station on the path to maturity and wisdom. Our goal is not to bypass the strategic ability stage, but to transcend it. As leaders, we can't ignore the economic and competitive pressures our organizations face, but we can either succumb to those pressures or go beyond those pressures. At the highest level of development, we're able to integrate our strategic sensibilities with those we had as a child. We don't want to be childish, but we want to be childlike. We don't want to be naive, but we want to recapture some of that innocence we had when we were younger. Maturity and wisdom involve understanding the ways of the world, but also how those ways of the world can interfere with living well. Maturity and wisdom mean not forgetting the things that made us happy when we were younger, not forgetting the things that make us happy today, not forgetting the things that make those around us happy and the things that make life worth living. Leaders have to wear two hats. There's an externally oriented hat focused on building strategic advantage, and there's an internally oriented hat focused on building community. At the highest level of maturity and wisdom, managers recognize that there's a time to be soft instead of just shrewd, caring instead of just cunning, warm-hearted instead of just tough-minded. When I worked at that consulting firm, when we faced moral dilemmas, the president of the company would ask us to do the rocking chair test. What is the rocking chair test? The rocking chair test is you imagine yourself in your old age, sitting on your porch, long since retired, in your rocking chair, listening to the birds and the sun going, watching the sun go down, and sitting in your rocking chair thinking about your life and wondering about whether you made good decisions. Did you make good choices? Are you proud of yourself? To paraphrase Lawrence Peter, would the child you were be proud of the adult you are? People always want to learn about the next big management idea. I had a conversation just the other day with a client who wanted to learn about the latest, greatest management fad for promoting workplace well-being. But promoting workplace well-being is not about learning. It's about remembering. It's about remembering what's important in life. It's about remembering what brought you joy as a child and building organizations that can support those kinds of experiences. It's about remembering the importance of relationships with ourselves and with others. Remember that.